Good evening, Dom. Let me tell you about a strange experience I had. During college, I wasn't the most sociable type. My grades weren't great. I wasn't part of any fraternity. I didn't have a girlfriend, and to be honest, I wasn't involved in much of anything. Happiness wasn't exactly my companion during that time either. But let's be clear, I'm not complaining. In the end, I met an amazing and loyal woman in my early 30s, someone who's always by my side. Now my life is great. We live together, we have 2 cats, Lilo and Loki, and I'm planning to propose soon. As I was saying, I never joined a fraternity, so those typical frat parties weren't part of my scene. Still, I wanted to have some fun because who doesn't, right? My friends Blake and Ian were in the same situation. We spent most weekends hanging out in Ryan's dorm, but whenever a party opportunity came up, we jumped on it. The parties we managed to attend usually happened off campus, which meant they weren't related to fraternities or the college. To give you an idea, there was one time we drove over an hour just to go to a party. You could say we were pretty desperate. One Friday afternoon, Ian texted the group saying the girl he was seeing knew about a party nearby. He always attracted some rather different girls. You know the type I'm talking about. Ryan immediately joked that he didn't want to end up at a death metal, emo, or anime party, and I kind of agreed. But Ian was determined and assured us it would be a normal party. Not that we had a better plan, so we were convinced. Ryan even managed to get his brother Chris to be our designated driver. Chris didn't drink, so he was cool with the idea. It seemed like everything was going to work out. While we were on our way to the party, Ian started complaining about the girl he had been talking to. He said she hadn't responded in hours, which honestly wasn't surprising to anyone, given the type of guy Ian was. He seemed genuinely bothered, to the point where he said he was thinking of backing out of going to the party, which sounded like unnecessary drama to us. We had already been on the road for half an hour, so turning back wasn't an option. We told him to chill out and not let it ruin the night. After a few more minutes, Ian blurted out that Karen's profile had disappeared from his phone. Right away, we realized he had been blocked and that she had probably found someone else to go to the party with. He sulked for the rest of the trip. When we finally got to the party, we knew right away we had made a good choice. The house was huge, especially compared to the others on the block. But Ian still didn't want to go in, saying he needed a drink to forget the situation. Ryan and I didn't see a problem with that, so we asked Chris to park a little further away so we could drink outside the car. We grabbed some of the beers we had brought and stood there watching the crowd pour into the house. The party seemed pretty lively, to be honest. Once Ian was satisfied with his level of drunkenness, the 4 of us started walking toward the house. As soon as we walked through the door, I felt something weird in the air. To start with, all the lights were on, no ambient lighting, just those harsh ceiling lights that you would normally expect to be off at a college party. And the people there were way overdressed, not the kind of attire you expect at a party with loud music. It looked more like a fancy dinner party than anything else, but maybe that was the point. The truth is, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't exactly seem out of place, but the difference in dress was pretty noticeable. The music was also, at the very least, strange. There was no trap, hip-hop, or any of the party music you would expect. Instead, what was playing was something ethereal, almost psychedelic. To be honest, I don't even know what genre it was or how to describe it, but none of the songs had lyrics, just instruments. Not that it was bad, but it was definitely weird. My friends and I exchanged looks trying to figure out what was going on. We pressed Ian for more details, but he was just as lost as we were. So, we started walking around the house, exploring a little. There were drinks everywhere, so we helped ourselves. After a few minutes, I noticed that some people were staring at me and then quickly looking away. It was so obvious that I started wondering if I had something in my teeth. In my head, it made sense that the stares were because of my clothes. Despite the strange vibe, we were actually having a good time. Well, except for Chris, who seemed kind of bored and eventually said he was going to go outside to smoke in the car. We figured it was because he hadn't had anything to drink, which probably explained his boredom. A few minutes after Chris left, a group of girls approached us. The truth is, we weren't exactly confident guys, so being approached like that was new for us. The three of them started flirting with us almost immediately. They didn't even try to hide it. They made a joke about charging an entrance fee, which I thought was funny until I realized they were serious. They were holding a bottle of tequila, and of course we weren't going to say no. Without thinking much, and to avoid looking lame, we took a shot. After that, the six of us stayed together, drinking, talking, and even dancing from time to time. Everything was going great. At one point, I noticed a strange mark on Laura's neck. It was a thin green line, like it had been drawn with a permanent marker. The line was so subtle that I probably wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been so close to her. I debated whether or not to ask about it, but I decided not to bring it up to avoid any awkward misunderstandings. Who knows, it could have been a birthmark or something like that. But after I noticed it, I couldn't stop staring. It seemed so out of place, and green of all colors. Who wears green makeup like that? It didn't even look like makeup. I decided to let it go and kept flirting with her, trying to see where things would go. After a while, I saw Ryan and the girl he was with going upstairs, which made me happy for him. Shortly after, I noticed Ian and his girl heading in the same direction. I was nervous about asking Laura for something more direct, afraid of messing things up. Even with the alcohol, I was starting to get really anxious and sweaty, so I told Laura I was going to the bathroom and would be right back. The only bathroom I could find was occupied, so I stood outside the door waiting. After a while, the door finally opened, and a tall guy who looked older stepped out. He was wearing a white dress shirt and linen pants. I rushed into the bathroom and he ended up bumping into me. I turned, expecting him to apologize, but the guy just stood there staring at me with a blank expression, as if he was studying me. It was really strange. I was about to say something when I noticed what was on his neck. The same green line I had seen on Laura's neck. It was identical. Even though I knew it wasn't the best idea, I asked him what his problem was. He smiled and shook his head, and then he said, "Who invited you?" Not really knowing what to say, I blurted out, "Karen, that girl who had ditched Ian." He laughed, looked up at the ceiling as if he knew who I was talking about, and then looked back at me, but this time without the smile. In a low voice, he repeated her name and gestured toward the party, saying, "Do you see Karen around here?" I didn't know what to say, so I just slammed the door in his face, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said, or that green line on his neck. Part of me regretted not asking more about what was going on there. I left the bathroom, looking for him. I passed by more people who were staring at me like I didn't belong there. But I didn't care. I needed to find my friends and get everyone out of there. As I walked through the party, I couldn't get that green mark out of my head. I started paying closer attention to people's necks, trying to see if anyone else had a similar mark. And to my horror, I saw two more people with those green lines on their necks. They were all the same. Same color, same size, same thickness. It was starting to freak me out. I kept searching for that guy while checking other people's necks. Most had nothing, but every now and then I'd see another green line on someone. I was getting really paranoid, so I decided to go upstairs to look for my friends. Fortunately, just as I started to climb the stairs, I saw Ryan and Ian coming down. I called out to them and pulled them into a quieter hallway so we could talk. I quickly explained my theory and said we needed to leave as soon as possible. They started laughing in my face, saying I was just drunk. Ryan even said I was jealous because they had hooked up with someone and I hadn't. I asked where his girl was, and he said she had asked him to meet her upstairs in 20 minutes. Ian said the same thing about his girl. There was no arguing with them. They were all excited about having hooked up. I told them to follow me, that I was going to prove to them that people had strange marks on their necks, but they didn't care. Just as I was about to give up, Ian turned his head to the side. What I saw was horrifying. There was a thin line on his neck, but this one was red, not green. I practically screamed at him, and finally, they started listening to me. I checked Ryan's neck too, and sure enough, there was another red mark. Ian told me to relax, saying it was probably just a makeup stain, but Ryan was starting to believe me. I told them we needed to leave, and Ryan and I turned to find the door. Ian was still reluctant, saying he wanted to meet up with the girl again. That's when a random guy passed by us, looking at each of us in a strange way. He didn't say anything, but he stayed long enough for us to notice the green line on his neck. That was the last straw. Ryan and I bolted for the door and Ian followed right behind us. It felt like everyone at the party was staring at us as we left, but no one did anything to stop us. We ran to Chris's car and told him to get us out of there as fast as possible. As we were driving away, Ian's and Ryan's phones started blowing up with messages. The girls were asking why we had left. How did they know if they weren't even around to see us leave? My friends ended up blocking the girls. Whenever I tell this story, everyone has a crazy theory about what happened that night. I honestly don't know what to think, but I'm also not sure I want to know what would have happened if that guy hadn't warned me. I am pursuing a postgraduate degree in civil engineering at Purdue University. I haven't been at it for very long. Things were actually going pretty well, now that I think about it. My classes were going fine, I met some nice people, and the apartment I managed to get had a fair price. The only problem was the landlord, who seemed a bit shady. I had a car and lived far from campus, but I enjoyed driving. The only downside was that the area was somewhat dangerous, but that didn't bother me much. I'm in my 20s, so I thought I could take care of myself. Yes, things were a bit monotonous, but my focus was on the degree, not on fun. Everything was going well until the day my backpack was stolen. I left it on a table in a random hallway to quickly go to the bathroom, like an idiot. When I came back, it was gone. And of course, that particular auditorium had no cameras, so there was really nothing I could do. I was more frustrated than anything else. My wallet, keys, and laptop were all in there. I had to cancel all my cards, notify the landlord about the keys, and even started looking for a new laptop. It was a huge stress, but these things happen. However, a few days later, I realized the situation was much more serious than I had imagined. That night, I came back from campus and found a note under the door. I thought it was some message from the landlord, but it was far from that. When I opened it, the note simply said, "I see you." No name, no signature, just those 3 words. Right away, I put the pieces together. Whoever had stolen my backpack had messed with my laptop and found out where I lived. That alone would have been terrifying. But the worst part was, this person also had my apartment keys. My skin started to crawl and I found myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone there. I ran into my apartment and slammed the door shut. Luckily, I had an internal lock, so even if someone tried to get in, they wouldn't be able to pass it. Throughout the following week, other notes arrived, all handwritten. They were short but filled with strange messages, things like, "I know what you did," or "keep an eye out." By this point, I was starting to get really scared. I had never done anything wrong, really, but if someone had gone through my laptop, who knows what they could have discovered? I was completely lost on what to do. Would going to the police do any good? I decided to wait a little longer, hoping that whoever was bothering me would get bored soon. Then, one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something strange. It was dark outside and my blinds were slightly open, but I swear I saw a flash, like someone had taken a picture of me. I closed the blinds right away, but my heart was already racing. I didn't see anyone outside, but it didn't stop there. I started to notice small changes in my apartment. At first I thought I was just distracted. My shoes would appear in different places, or my jacket, which should have been hung up, was thrown over the chair. They were small things I could explain away if I wanted to, but then one day I came home to find my sheets thrown on the floor and my room completely ransacked. The dresser drawers were all open, my books scattered across the floor. It looked like someone had searched the entire place. I called the police, of course, but it didn't do much good. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing had been stolen, so they said there wasn't much they could do. I asked the landlord to change the locks, but he told me it would take at least 2 days to get someone to do it. I begged him to make it happen sooner, but he just shrugged and said it wasn't an emergency. I felt betrayed. How could he not think this was urgent? I kept insisting, but he stopped responding no matter how much I tried. That was literally yesterday. As I write this, I barely slept all night, even though I knew I was safe with the internal lock. I'm thinking of changing the locks myself, but I don't know how to do it without causing some expensive damage. I cancelled all my classes this morning because I'm too afraid to leave the room. I'm still here, writing all this. I'm prepared to face whoever it is if they come back. I'm sure that if they accessed my laptop, they know my class schedule. Maybe I'll hide and catch them by surprise if they try to come in while I'm supposed to be at class. I think that's what I'll do. I'll give an update as soon as I can. Good evening, everyone. I can no longer hold back this problem that's been bothering me for some time now. Recently, I ended my 2-year relationship with David. It wasn't a horrible breakup, but it was far from peaceful. The truth is, we had been fighting for months, and it was clear that it wasn't going to work out. When we finally decided to call it quits, I thought it would be the best thing to do. I blocked him on all social media, and that was it. We moved on. I study at Temple University and live in a tiny apartment close to campus. It's on the 2nd floor of an older building, which means I can hear pretty much everything that happens outside. A few days after the breakup, I started noticing some strange noises at night. They weren't the normal city sounds. These were different. They sounded like footsteps, soft movements, as if someone was right there, outside my window. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but over time I accepted that it was probably David. The only reason I wasn't freaking out was because he had always been such a sweet and harmless guy. I mean, he would never do anything crazy or hurt me. In my mind, he was just missing me, so I decided to ignore it. I figured he would give up sooner or later. On top of everything, I was already super stressed from the breakup and had a huge group project to deal with. This project, by the way, is a pretty important part of the story. I was responsible for reviewing and submitting the final work to the professor. I spent the entire night adjusting every detail, making sure everything was perfect, and finally sent it by email, relieved, just before midnight. After that, I went to bed, trying to push away all the other things that were going wrong in my life. The next day, we were supposed to present the video in class. The professor connected his laptop and opened the file I had sent. I was nervous, but also a bit proud of what we had done. Since I had a lot of experience with Adobe products, I knew our video was probably a level above the other groups. But then the video started playing, and my heart sank. That wasn't our work. Instead, a pixelated video of someone wearing a scream mask appeared, and the worst part, the person wasn't just standing there, they were speaking, saying horrible things about me, the professor, the government. It was disgusting. I can't even repeat what was said. It was that disturbing. My professor let the video play longer than he should have, probably because he was in shock too. When he finally paused it, he was completely pale. I, on the other hand, was paralyzed. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. I just stood there, frozen. I wanted to cry but couldn't. I could barely breathe. It was as if everyone's eyes in the room were locked on me. I knew exactly what they were thinking. After the most agonizing seconds of my life, I snapped out of my shock and started crying before running out of the room. A panic attack was coming. I thought about going straight home, but I knew that if I fled for good, I'd definitely be expelled. So reluctantly, I waited outside the building until class was over so I could speak to the professor. I basically begged him, explaining that I had no idea what had happened and that I was sure I had sent the correct video. He agreed to hear me out and confirmed that 2 files had been sent. The first was my project, and the most recent one was the one he had opened in class. Resolving everything with the university took time and effort, but in the end, I managed. I won't bore you with the details. However, nothing could erase the humiliation of that day. It also became clear that my email had been hacked, which, obviously, was a much bigger problem. I changed my password and thought I'd just had really bad luck. But that's when things truly got worse. Less than a week later, I woke up logged out of Snapchat. That only happens when someone else logs in, so clearly my account had been hacked too. I don't even want to imagine what they might have found there. There were things on my Snapchat that I don't even like to talk about. I called the police, told them everything that was happening, and, to my surprise, David agreed to be questioned. The police confirmed that he wasn't involved in this. However, he admitted to posting some of my personal information on an online forum right after our breakup. He swore he never shared any of my passwords, but since I used the same password for everything and they were pretty easy to guess, that put me at risk. The police told me there wasn't much they could do, as David wasn't responsible for the hacking. That's when the full weight of the situation hit me. Someone had access to practically all of my private information. They could even blackmail me if they wanted. I changed my passwords immediately, but it might have been too late. A few weeks passed, and so far nothing has happened. My best guess is that whoever was tormenting me realized I had involved the police and decided not to risk getting caught. I thought this nightmare was finally over. Of course it wasn't. One day a random person added me on Snapchat, which, honestly, isn't that uncommon, but when I accepted, they started sending me photos of me. I'm sure you can imagine the kind of photos I'm talking about. I blocked the contact before they had the chance to threaten me, but I knew that's exactly what they were going to do. I broke down in tears. I had never felt so powerless in my life. For about a week, random profiles kept adding me on Snapchat. I knew it was the same person, but I never accepted the requests, afraid they'd blackmail me or ask for money. This has been going on for a few days, and I honestly don't know what to do. I have no proof, no way of finding out who this person is. The police don't have enough information to get involved, and I don't think they could do much even if they wanted to. The worst part is that this person literally knows where I live and everything about my life. If I keep ignoring the requests on Snapchat, they might end up doing something more serious. They've already been lurking around my apartment. I don't doubt they're capable of going further. All I can do is hope they get bored and leave me alone. To any young person reading this, please be careful with the kind of photos you keep on your phone. I don't know if this nightmare will ever end. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to leave your like, it's very important. Well, let's continue. It was supposed to be one of the last, if not the last, delivery of the night for me. I was working at a pizzeria called Leonardo's. One of my managers, Robert, was on the night shift with me. He was the one who decided who would handle which delivery. An order came in for a few regular pizzas, and he handed me a piece of paper with the customer's address and phone number. This was back in 2009. At that time, I didn't have a GPS on my phone, just a basic flip phone. I didn't have one of those Garmin GPS devices either, so I still relied on an old physical map to find my way during deliveries. The street for this last delivery had a name like Willows Road. I don't remember the house number or the name on the order, but I do remember how difficult it was to find the place. The delivery was in a very rural area, surrounded by forests, farmland, and more forests. The lack of streetlights only made things worse. I had to stop a few times, turn on the interior light in the car, and check the map again. It was always stressful when I couldn't find a house. I was on a very quiet, dark, and confusing road when I decided to just call the number on the paper my manager had given me. The phone rang several times, and it seemed like there wasn't even a voicemail. It probably rang 10 times before someone finally picked up. I waited for them to say hello, but since no one said anything, I spoke first. Then, a voice on the other end replied. It was a deep, low voice, but very soft. I said, "I'm the pizza delivery guy. I'm having trouble finding your house." He explained that the entrance was easy to miss, that it looked just like a dirt trail. He spoke very slowly, with a monotonous voice, describing the surroundings of the entrance so I could find it. Eventually, I did. I turned the car onto that narrow dirt trail. It was really easy to miss. It took about 30 seconds of driving very slowly and carefully before I saw a small, one-story house appear. A faint orange glow came from inside, and I could see through the window. I parked my car next to the only other vehicle I could see, an old, beat-up pickup truck. I grabbed the 2 pizzas from the passenger seat and walked up to the front door of the house. I looked for a doorbell but couldn't find one, so I knocked on the door. I could hear muffled music coming from inside. After a while, I heard footsteps approaching the door, then stopping. About 10 seconds later, the door opened just a crack and I could only see a part of the person's face. Literally, I could only see one of their eyes peeking out. I nervously said, "Hey, you ordered the pizza, right?" And the guy replied, "Oh yes, the pizza." I recognized the voice from the phone call. There was an awkward pause. I didn't know what else to say except, "Do you have the money?" He answered, "Yes, I'll get it." He stepped away from the door, and I heard his footsteps heading into another room. There was an old song from the 1930s playing, which made the atmosphere even weirder and more uncomfortable, as if it wasn't unsettling enough already. Then the door started to slowly open on its own, revealing more and more of that dimly lit room. Everything inside the house looked incredibly old. There were metal plates on the floor, probably covering up holes. The couch looked like it was from another century. In fact, all the furniture had this same antique vibe. And the music was coming from an old gramophone, one of those with a large horn on top. That's all I could see at first, just peeking in curiously. But what really bothered me was the smell. There was a smell of death inside. I stood there waiting, trying to be polite, while the guy went off to get the money wherever he was. When enough time had passed for the situation to start feeling strange, I knocked on the open door, looked inside, and said, "Sir?" His voice came from another room. "Yes?" "Would you mind coming to the kitchen, please?" My co-workers and managers always said never to enter someone's house unless it was really necessary. That advice seemed more important than ever in this situation. I heard what the man said, but I still asked, "Sorry, can you repeat that?" He repeated, "Could you come to the kitchen, please?" I took a step inside, and honestly, it felt like my feet were going to go through the floor. The house was so old that the floor sunk a little as I walked. It had a very linear layout. When I looked to the right, I saw the entrance to the kitchen where his voice was coming from. On the other side, to the left, there was a narrow hallway with several doors along the right side. At the end of the hallway, there was a man with his back to me dancing slowly in a creepy way. He was really feeling it. And I don't mean in a confident way. I mean he was literally touching his own body while moving in an incredibly disturbing manner. In any other situation, I would have laughed, but I was completely unsettled by the kind of house I had just entered. I turned and looked toward the kitchen, still holding the 2 pizza boxes. I took a few steps toward the kitchen until I finally noticed someone peeking from behind the wall, separating the kitchen from the living room. It was that man's face again, showing only a quarter of his face with just one eye creepily spying on me. The only thoughts going through my head at that moment were, "What the hell? And should I just leave?" I repeated what I had said at the front door moments earlier, asking again if he had the money. The man didn't answer. He started to laugh, or I don't even know if you could call it a laugh, because it was a mix of low and high tones, but at the same time very subtle and soft. Then, out of nowhere, he yelled, "Randall!" in a surprisingly loud voice, much stronger and more authoritative than the calm, monotone voice from earlier. I was at my breaking point with how much weirdness I could handle. I turned and started walking back toward the front door, and when I looked down the hallway, almost out the door, I realized that the guy who had been dancing seconds ago was now just standing there, staring at me. I rushed out the front door and closed it behind me. I hurried back to the car, still holding the pizzas for some reason. I threw the pizza boxes onto the passenger seat and got into the car as fast as I could. As I reversed to back out and maneuver around the pickup truck, I glanced back at the house and saw that the door was wide open again. My heart started racing with the thought that one of them might be outside, about to try and open one of the car doors. Maybe they were outside and I'll never know, but I managed to drive down that dirt trail and get back onto the road. I needed to get back to the pizzeria. I called Robert to tell him what had happened. He wasn't mad at me. When I got back to the pizzeria, everyone laughed when I told the story. I can see how it sounds funny when telling it to others, but at the time, it was anything but funny. Whatever was happening in that house wasn't normal, and I doubt they really wanted to buy pizza. After that, I had several dreams where I saw that man's face peeking from behind a wall, and I never again entered anyone's house or apartment while making deliveries.